Welcome to the latest podcast from the Plastic Surgery Journal Club. Each month we review and appraise a journal article, typically from PRS, and summarize it for you in this short podcast. The full journal can be obtained from the PRS website.
Hi, and this is another paper from the August 2016 Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery Journal Club coming to you from Sydney, Australia. The next paper we looked at was Perforator mapping and optimising design of the lateral arm flap, anatomy revisited and clinical experience. This is from Dr. Chang et al. From both Texas and Lebanon, and it was published in the August 2016 PRS. So I'm with Dr. Constant van Schakveit, who's one of the registrars here at St George Hospital. So, Con, what was this paper about?
This paper was a clinical series of 51 patients who had lateral arm flap reconstruction of head and neck defects, and also involved a anatomic study of 12 cadavers looking at the actual anatomy of these flaps and describing perforator location, pedicle length, and sort of trying to find a reliable anatomy in this area. The surgical techniques used here was, first of all, 12 fresh cadavers were dissected. Both arms were dissected after injection with latex, and then perforator location, number, and pedicle lengths were just mapped. In terms of the human studies, there were 51 sequential patients who underwent lateral arm reconstruction. In those patients, the perforator location and number were also mapped, but in this we also were able to look at the diameter of the artery and veins intraoperatively. Main findings in this group was that bilateral perforator systems were usually symmetric, or always symmetric, in the cadaveric dissections. 5 out of 12 had 3 perforators, 6 out of 12 had 2 perforators, and 1 in 12 had 1 perforator. Only 5 out of the 56 perforators had a short intramuscular course, so almost all of them were exclusively septocutaneous. The first perforator, which was numbered A, was found 7 centimeters from the deltoid insertion. The second perforator, B, was found 9.9 centimeters from the deltoid insertion, and the third, C, was found 11.8 centimeters from the deltoid insertion. And the average pedicle length was 7 centimeters. And this data correlated almost exactly with the patients who underwent these flap reconstructions. The average arterial diameter was 1.7 millimeters, and the average venous diameter was 2.5 millimeters. And there were no flap losses, and the donor side morbidity was almost none. In conclusion, the lateral arm flap could be a useful alternative when forearm or thigh flaps are not available. They've shown that perforator anatomy is relatively reliable and that there is minimal donor side morbidity. I think the consensus in the group was that although this flap is relatively useful as a secondary option, it wouldn't be a primary one, still due to the short pedicle length and the thickness of the flap itself for the types of reconstruction they normally get used for.
Yeah, I think one of the issues I had with the study was their description of the anatomy. They mentioned that the radicollateral artery was a branch of the brachial, whereas most traditional descriptions of the flap talk to it being one of the branches of the profunda brachii, which travels with the radial nerve through the triangular space in the axilla. So that was sort of just a different way of sort of describing the anatomy of the flap. And in like some of the textbooks like Cormack and Lambert, they talk about a middle collateral artery and a radial collateral artery and the different course of it, and that sort of wasn't mentioned in their anatomical description. Certainly, the consensus of the group was actually pretty much what they also said in the paper, was that their preferred option would be a radial forearm, but that the lateral arm, can be an option in some patients. And anecdotally, I completely concur that sometimes the artery can be particularly small and the pedicle length can be disappointing. There was a paper that we did actually from JPRAS many years ago in the Journal Club, which was a Brazilian paper where they actually cited the skin paddle far more distally, and it extended onto the proximal part of the forearm over sort of the lateral epicondyle, which would therefore give you a number of give you extra pedicle length. But looking based on the perforator mapping, I guess it would be a risk using the Brazilian technique that you would really only be capturing the C perforator, maybe the B, but I guess if you sort of kept the whole septum, I don't know whether that would be enough to keep the skin paddle alive, but that's what the only thing is. You can see in the photos where they've got a drawing of the flap, it does look very proximal on the arm. It's not even extending down anywhere near the lateral epicondyle, so it really does make for a short pedicle length. But obviously they did have a very significant number of free flaps, which they did without any flap losses or obviously any damage to the radial nerve. But that was an excellent summary, Con. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. For more of our podcasts, head to soundcloud.com or subscribe to us on iTunes and search Plastic Surgery Journals. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Thanks also to the PRS Journal team for their ongoing support.